Good morning. Can you hear me? Or is this even on?
No.
It's not on? Just use my voice?
Yeah.
Okay, I've never been challenged vocally, so please let me know if you aren't able to hear. My name is Jackie Williams, and I direct the College Savings Initiative at New America Foundation. And I've worked on college savings issues now for over a decade. For 10 years, I was the executive director of the Ohio Tuition Trust Authority, which operated that state's 529 college savings plans. And thanks to all of you this morning for coming and having an opportunity to hear a little bit more about 529 plans, and also to hear about some potential federal options that could help broaden and expand the participation in these plans. Some of the work that we've done at New America, but also some of the work that others are doing as well, both in the Congress as well as the states which operate the 529 college savings plans. I was going to please ask you to take many materials from the back table. We've provided a sample of some of the brochures from some of the states that offer 529 plans. I think we have materials from Maryland, Virginia, and Ohio. Please take those with you because I think will give you an important perspective on what these plans are, how they're offered, how they're marketed, which is good for your background information. There are also a couple of position papers there. There's one from New America. There's a policy paper on 529 plans and some policy options for basically extending the participation of these plans to broader audiences. There's also a piece from the College Savings Plans Network. They currently have legislation, HR 1351, which they have been promoting in the Congress and being successful getting people to sign on as original co-sponsors. So there are a couple of position papers in the back that outline the provisions of that particular initiative so that you can take those and be aware of those as well. There's also a list of the current number of people in Congress who are co-signatories to that piece of legislation. So thank you again. We'll have the opportunity today to hear from the Honorable Jim Cooper from Tennessee. He is making a vote and will be here shortly. We're also going to hear from Joan Marshall, who's the Executive Director of the College Savings Plans of Maryland and is the current chair of the College Savings Plans Network. But first, I'm going to introduce Ben, and I'm going to be very careful pronouncing his last name, Stoltzfus, and he is the legislative assistant to Representative Joe Pitts from Pennsylvania. Representative Pitts has been very active in looking at savings issues. He is a co-chair of the Congressional Savings and Ownership Caucus, and he's been a leader in promoting legislation that would make it easier for Americans to save and invest in their future, including several pieces of legislation pertaining to 529 plans. He has introduced a piece of legislation that would provide incentives for employers to be able to offer these programs more broadly in the workplace. So without further ado, I'll ask Ben to come up and make brief introductory comments.
Thank you, Jackie. I apologize, Congressman isn't able to make it. My boss, Congressman Joe Pitts, has been working on these issues, and we've introduced HR 2500, and I passed it on to your colleague. Hopefully you all have it. We introduced that bill last Congress as well. Would like to have more support, but we're still working on it. As you may or may not have seen, the President has introduced or sort of put out some feelers on his new plans for revising No Child Left Behind. I've taken a look at it, and we think that a lot of the intentions are great. One of them, I think one of the most important, is his recognition that the college completion rates in America are simply not where they need to be. We used to lead the world in this area, and since over the past 20 years, we've just sort of dropped off 10 or 15 spots, I believe. And so the President is looking at changing No Child Left Behind to focus on and to make sure our high schoolers have better opportunities to go to college, can afford it, have funding mechanisms, and that they then graduate from college, because obviously if we're not getting that done, we can't compete. So it's important. And so in that light, one of the things that we're all looking at, and I think what we're looking at today, is this notion that we need to be able to find ways to have parents save for their children's future, so that when the kid gets to be a senior in high school, they don't look at $40,000 of debt or a job that will pay them at least to meet their immediate needs. So that's the angle that we're taking on this bill. The bill, the Help Kids Save for College Act, is designed to allow employees to match employer contributions to the 529 plans that we'll be talking about more today, dollar for dollar up to $1,000, and then that matching amount is before taxes. So we'd like to think that if we get this opportunity, if we can pass the bill, employees would be interested in offering it as sort of a benefit to employers. It's a good opportunity for our parents or parents in general to be thinking about ways to save for their kids' educations. Obviously, the other issue that we're having, aside from just college graduation, is saving rates in America. I think over the past 2 years, post-crisis, they've increased somewhat, but we're still not where we need to be. And savings, as you may know, is one of the key indicators of economic mobility. And so we're looking at ways to do that. We're looking at ways to get kids into college and through college. And Congressman Pitts believes that his bill would help that process. And so we'd love to have any of your bosses or institutions support the bill, co-sign. Just give us a call anytime. That's all that I have. I know Justin mentioned something about questions. If you all have questions about the bill or just the Congressman's perspective in general, I'd be happy to answer them.
Your boss is on HR 1351 as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's the...
Sorry.
Yes,
No,
that's
it's
bills that we're talking
Okay.
about. Yeah, but
Very
he
good.
is.
Great.
He
Good.
was an early supporter.
Excellent. Very good. Yes?
So you mentioned that no child left behind reform is happening.
Yes.
Sometimes.
Well, I should say there's sort of a discussion draft that the administration has put out. And like I said, I mean, and this is, for those of you who don't know, the Congressional Savings and Ownership Caucus is bipartisan, and so we're always looking for ways to work together. Sometimes it's tough, sometimes it's easy, but I think in terms of the president's proposal, at least the initial ideas, we like a lot of them, and we'd certainly like to support him in that effort if possible. So does that, I don't, in terms of when that will actually happen, my guess is, it's not going to happen this year. I think there's a good chance that'll be a key agenda next year, but it sort of obviously depends on a lot of different moving parts. So, other questions?
Would this be offered, how would you promote this to employers and employees? Would it be offered also in minimum wage position jobs?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know that I've had that question presented before. I'm not sure if I have a great answer for you at this point. I think if employees that want to do it, if they have wage earners or salaries, I don't think that's an issue, although I'm guessing this is going to be more towards the salary crowd, but that's included as well. Well, thanks. And thanks for coming. We really appreciate it. Congressman sends his regards. This is an important issue. We really think that our educational reform, which is very closely tied to this issue, is going to be crucial if we're going to continue growing as a nation. Thanks a lot.
Ben, can you stick around for a little bit?
I can.
So if there's some questions later, that would be great. And I just wanted to mention, the state of Illinois really is the first state that actually began offering employer credits for contributions to 529 plans. It was implemented, it was passed into law in 2009. It was actually effective for tax year 2009. So you might want to look at the Illinois bill, but I think it involves any person who's employed in a particular work environment. So we'd very much like to see something happen on the federal level so that all employers would have something to do with in helping to grow these accounts and building more savings. So you might want to take a look at that. We are going to wait for Representative Cooper, who is casting a vote. And what we'd like to do is to bring Joan Marshall up instead. Joan shares a lot of similar background with me. She's been in her current position running the Maryland 529 plan since 1998. But prior to that, she worked for AT&T. So we have kind of the similar professional background. But she is currently the chair of the College Savings Plans Network. The College Savings Plans Network is a subsidiary of the National Association of State Treasurers. And that organization was really formed so that as different states developed college savings plans, they would have a professional organization that they could work with and share ideas with in order really to build upon best practices. The one great thing about 529 plans is that since every state and the District of Columbia and one private consortium all offer 529 plans, they have a vested interest in continuing to innovate and make these plans better and to broaden participation by larger numbers of people. So Jen is the leader of that organization, and we'll hear from her now.
Thank you very much, Jackie, and thank you to the New America Foundation for inviting me here today. I'm very proud to be representing the College Savings Plans Network. We refer to it as CSPN. And as Jackie mentioned, CSPN is an affiliate of the National Association of State Treasurers. It was founded in 1991 as a nonprofit association bringing together all of the states that administer Section 529 college savings plans, as well as their private sector partners. Key to CSPN's mission is educating families about the importance of saving for college and the benefits of 529 plans, including especially how easy and affordable it is to start a college savings plan. In nearly every state, families can start to save for college with as little as $25 a month. And in some states, they can start with as little as $15 a month, and there's a couple of states that don't even have a minimum requirement to be able to start a college savings plan. Also, CSPN monitors federal activities and promotes legislative and regulatory changes that will positively impact 529 plans. Our website is collegesavings.org, and we believe that it's the most complete and the most objective online source of information about 529 plans. It provides a wealth of consumer information about these plans and a robust feature that allows anyone to compare all of the 529 plans based on a wide variety of features or characteristics, as well as doing other state-to-state plan comparisons as well. Now, last summer, CSPN began to work with the Treasury Department as part of the Vice President's Middle Class Task Force as they studied 529 plans. Central to this effort was an analysis of 7 million 529 plan accounts, which we think is the largest analysis of 529 account data that's occurred since the inception of 529 plans. A few of the important conclusions that I'd like to share with you today include, first, the number of 529 accounts and the total amount invested have increased steadily over time, with the exception of the 2008-2009 downturn, but even then we saw positive growth in the numbers of accounts. Additionally, the average balance in a 529 plan was $11,751. That was as of June of last year. Now, you can look at that from two angles. One angle is we're glad that we have those account balances. On the other hand, though, you also need to recognize that's not enough to even pay for full expenses at most public colleges for 1 year. On the other hand, many of the beneficiaries in our plans are still younger children, so those families are continuing to build their savings. But I think what it does say is that these plans are generally being used by middle America to save for college. They're not being used predominantly by the wealthy who are dumping couple $100,000 in a college savings plan. So the overall account balance, like I said, was about $11,750. Additionally, 41% of the accounts were signed up for some form of automatic contributions, and those are typically automatic monthly contributions that are coming out of a checking or savings account. Again, a sign that middle-income families are relying on these plans to be able to save for future college expenses. Also, the highest concentration of 529 accounts was appropriately for beneficiaries who are in the kindergarten through 5th grade age range. That's also very positive too, because it shows that more families are starting to save when their children are very young and then building from there. Also, 529 plans offer investment options that are both prudent and sufficiently broad in choice to be able to provide a wide variety of options to suit families' individual circumstances. Now, this information and much more are contained in CSPN's, what we call the 529 report, that was published in March. It's available on our website, again, collegesavings.org, and you can click on the home page, the bottom right corner, 529 report. You'll see a bright orange cover. It looks like this. You can't miss it. I wasn't able to bring copies for everyone today, but it is contained on our website, and it contains a wealth of information that resulted from that data analysis from last summer, and I'd highly recommend it to you. Now, just to build on that, just a few updated numbers as of last December 2009, there was approximately $134 billion invested in 11 to 12 million 529 savings and prepaid tuition accounts nationwide. There are some 106 plans that are sold across all 50 states plus the District of Columbia. So while we're pleased with the growth of these plans, we certainly know that we have much farther to go to be able to capture more of the college savings dollars that are out there, as well as to be able to encourage all families who have college dreams for their children to start to save at the earliest possible date. Now, also, we have a 529 holiday coming up at the end of March. We call it 529 Day because it happens to be May 29th. And so we're starting to use that date more and more to be able to use that time to create more awareness of 529 plans and understanding of the features and benefits that it offers. So you'll see a number of activities going on that states will be sponsoring, as well as their private sector partners around the country promoting this 529 Day. And one of the main themes that we're going to be pursuing for that day is to try to do some myth busting, because whenever we talk about 529 plans, there's a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of myths surrounding 529 plans. So just thought I'd run through with you some of the myths that we're going to be looking to combat on 529 Day. And the first one is that my state's 529 plan can only be used at colleges in my state. I hear that all the time in Maryland because we happen to be a big exporter of college students. Not true. 529 plans can generally be used at any institution that's been accredited by an organization recognized by the U.S. Department of Education and eligible to accept federal financial aid. So they're not restricted to being used in state. Another myth, a 529 plan can only be used at four-year colleges. That is not true either. 529 plans can be used at a wide variety of eligible trade and technical schools as well. Clearly, community colleges are part of that. Graduate school is part of that. But again, this is not exclusively to save for a child to go to a four-year college. So we certainly have goals of all students continuing some form of education beyond high school. 529 plans are not limited to just colleges. Another myth, 529 plans are only for young children. Because we spend so much of our time trying to encourage parents of young children to start a college savings plan, many people start to think that that's our only target, and it isn't. In fact, in nearly all 529 savings plans, they are open to folks of any age. So these are great vehicles to be able to use for lifelong learning, as well as for workforce re-education and training as well, particularly with this economy. There's this talk about 8.2 million people that were out of work in this recession. These are great tools to be able to have people invest earlier on and be able to use the funds, or we'll talk about employers as well. They're a great vehicle for employers to be able to invest in to support workforce retraining for their employees as well. Another myth, hopefully this is not a big one in Washington, but the tax advantages of 529 plans will expire. Well, we're very thankful that in the 2006 Pension Protection Act, repealed that 2010 sunset provision for the federal tax exemption, so we're very pleased with that. But we don't have an expiration date, fortunately. Another myth, if my child doesn't go to college, I will lose all my money. I mean, I hate to see people say, what if my child doesn't go to college, because I'd like to think more positively, but I do understand that people don't have a fear of not wanting to lose their money, obviously. But we tell families they don't have to do anything if their child gets out of high school and decides they don't want to go to college immediately. The money could be there waiting for that child. I often say, let a child go out into the real world and see what life is like with any college education, and hopefully if the money's there, in a year or two they'll choose to move it. But even if they don't, at any point in time, families can change the beneficiary to a wide range of family members of the child that was originally enrolled. So it could be other children in the family, it could be back to the parents, it could even go to first cousins. So again, there's a wide range of family members who can use the plan. And if the worst comes and the family wants to take the money out and not use it for eligible college costs, their tax benefits are reversed, so they'll pay taxes on any earnings, and they'll pay 10% federal penalty, again, only on the earnings portion of their withdrawal. So they certainly don't lose most of their money. Now, my last myth for the day is if I save now, my child won't be eligible to receive as much financial aid later. That's a big fear of families, and the explanation here is fairly complicated for average families, because we tell them that any money that they save in a 529 plan will typically be considered as a parental asset when the family looks to be considered for need-based financial aid down the road. Now, that's better than being considered a student's asset, but at the same time, parental assets are assessed at about 6% toward the family's ability to pay for college in the fall. By the time we've said this to most families, their eyes have glazed over, because they can't, it's really difficult to track all that through. So we've been in conversations with the U.S. Department of Education about, at a minimum, having a clearer message around how 529 savings affects eligibility for financial aid. And my preference would be to not have funds invested in a 529 plan be counted against the family when it comes time to be considered for need-based financial aid. But most importantly, to have a much clearer message to families, because right now I think that too many families have put off saving for college because they're afraid it's going to keep them out of some sort of free money down the road. And I think we all know that when you look at federal financial aid, 60% of all federal financial aid now is in the form of loans. So very often when people think they're qualifying for aid, they're really qualifying for a large package of loans in that amount as well. And so we tell families that any amount they can save in a 529 plan could be that much less than they or their children may have to borrow to be able to finance college down the road. Now, moving on to our federal agenda, we are at CSPN are strong advocates for H.R. 1351, which does three things to significantly improve 529 plans. Most importantly, we believe that passage of this bill will help low and moderate income families to be able to save for college in greater numbers, mainly because this bill would extend the current Savers tax credit, which currently applies only to retirement savings for moderate income families, to also include savings in the 529 college savings plan. So again, we think that will be an important incentive to low and moderate income families to encourage them to save for college. Additionally, this bill would allow families to be able to redirect the investments in their 529 plan twice a year. That would mean they could move their money from one investment option to another within their 529 plan twice a year. Currently, they can only do that once a year. Last year, after the turmoil that we saw in the markets at the end of 2008, for 2009, the Treasury Department issued a notice that allowed participants in 529 plans to move their money twice, but that was only for calendar year 2009. We've since reverted back to only being able to move money once a year. We're concerned about that with the volatility in investment markets. We think twice a year is a very reasonable approach, and that's what this bill would allow families to do. Third, it would also allow computers, the purchase of computers, to be considered as an eligible higher education expense from 529 plans. That is currently allowed. However, it's in the stimulus bill, which, as you all know, is going to expire at the end of this year. So we really think that the purchase of a computer is a reasonable higher education expense. And in fact, it was just an anomaly that wasn't included much earlier on to begin with. So again, every child that goes to college today needs some sort of computer, and that would be included as part of this bill. So HR 1351 currently has 62 co-sponsors, and I'm very pleased that Representative Pitts was a very early co-sponsor of this bill. And we're continuing to build more, and we'd love to have conversations with any of you in the room who are interested in talking about this bill further. But when you look at the list of co-sponsors, and I have copies of the current co-sponsors in the back, you'll see that it runs a very wide range of the political spectrum. College Savings has broad bipartisan support, and which we're very pleased to see as well. And we also believe that increasing the level of involvement by employers is going to be a very important part of continuing to build college savings, particularly among moderate income families. So, we certainly want to explore further options for encouraging more employers to more actively participate. I think if you see what happened in the 401k industry, you look at the importance of employers in helping to build retirement savings, I think that we need a similar type of involvement from employers to help their employees to learn about these plans and to make it easy for them to save. And so we, beyond the passage of 1351, we're really looking to encourage the involvement of more employers, again, with a goal of helping to significantly increase the amount of college savings by moderate income families. So with that, I will end my formal remarks, and I'll be happy to take any questions later on. Thank you very much.
I regret that Representative Cooper is not going to be able to join us. Apparently there are a number of votes that are calling for his attention. So what I will do is to try to summarize a couple of ideas that at New America we've been working on developing in terms of a potential federal agenda. In addition, there's some changes at the federal level, at the state level as well, that we think would work to help make these plans more broadly available for people at every income level. First of all, every state that offers one of these plans has a mandate, and that is to have as many people in that state as possible be able to have access to these plans. That is written into almost every single state charter that was responsible for creating these plans. So they have a very strong commitment to doing that. There's some ideas that we think that are floating around that could be significantly helpful in allowing more people to save. And we've been working at New America with the Center for Social Development at Washington University at St. Louis, who does a lot of research. And there's a particular point of research that just kind of struck me over the head with all the terrific research they've done. They have a recent study that shows that when controlling for other factors, such as household income and the child's academic achievement, that children who are in households with savings that are dedicated for college are 4 times more likely to attend college than those children who do not. And in fact, when children have savings accounts in their own names, which typically is the way that 529 plans are structured, that they're actually 7 times more likely to attend college than a child under identical family circumstances. That's a pretty compelling piece of evidence, and I think that's kind of the modern equivalent of the parent in the family thinking the child can go to college and talking to them about it from a very early age. It's a tangible representation of the fact that there's an expectation that they'll go to college. When you survey folks and ask them whether or not they aspire for their children to go to college, about 91% of all parents, regardless of family income, indicates that they expect their child to go to college. The difference often is that the children who end up going to college, their parents have a plan for getting them there. And we think that that's significant, and we want to help everyone to have a plan. There are a few things that we think would be extremely helpful in this. And one is, in looking at removing disincentives for college, for saving for college, Joan actually touched upon this, and that is one of family assets. We think that 529 savings should be excluded from public assistance programs such as TANF, Medicaid, and Social Security. And the rules among these may vary significantly from state to state, but the federal government really could have an active role in streamlining these assets across programs to make sure that collecting assets and attempting to save is not a disincentive to be able to get financial assistance and go to college. Simplifying the FAFSA is a very easy to understand. Many families leave money on the table because of the complexity of the form or the fact that they're fearful that the assets that they own will disqualify them for financial assistance. So we think that it's very important to reform the FAFSA, to simplify it, and to allow families to have a certain level of assets and still be able to qualify for any financial assistance. One of the other things, and we think this is either a Treasury role or perhaps a legislative role, and that is to allow states to offer default investment options. And what that means is when people go in and they try to enroll in these plans, either online or with a paper application, the real enemy of participation is procrastination. And most of us are not financial experts, and that's the place that most people seem to get stuck. So if there could be a rule that says it's all right to offer a default investment option, so if a person doesn't feel comfortable or gets stuck, they would have the ability then to go into a default investment, which should be something that's principal protected, and therefore they would be able to get into the plan and to participate early on. Also, and I find this kind of hard to believe, but there should be, I think, a mandate or a directive that every single 529 plan offer principal protected options. And I was surprised to find out that not all plans offer principal protected options. There are a lot of people who think of themselves as savers more than investors, and they are simply not comfortable taking any risk whatsoever with their college savings dollars. Even if that means that the return on investment will not approach the level of tuition inflation, they're willing to do that because to them, being able to set aside some monies is really sacred and it's an important part of their child's future. So I think that principal protected options should be a component of every single 529 plan. We think that there are some promising things happening at the federal level. One is the College Access and Completion Fund, which has been approved by the House but not yet by the Senate, provides a pool of financial resources that could be made available to the states. One of the really innovative things that they have done is many states do offer matching programs, where if a family signs up to enroll in a 529 plan, they will pay an initial deposit into an account, or sometimes over time they will make additional deposits if the family puts their own assets into that fund. This is really extremely helpful for families of low and moderate income to help them build a balance over time. And often the amount of money that's in the account is not as important as the existence of the account. Sometimes just the ownership of a very small account means the difference between having to borrow for college and not having to borrow for college. So we think that that would be a very important factor in helping families. The other thing would be to allow families to actually enroll or open 529 accounts on their tax return forms. Some states now will allow families to actually dedicate a portion of their income tax refund through their income tax form, which we think is very promising because for a lot of low-income families, that's the one time during the year where they have a pool of financial resources available that they can dedicate to something such as college savings. So we think that an active role not only at the federal level but at the state level to allow families to enroll on their tax form, but certainly to allow them to dedicate some of their income tax refund back to 529 plans and college savings plans goes a long way towards helping build a savings mentality. And then the other thing, two other small points, and then we'll open things up to questions, is that we're seeing a number of developments in places now where there's actually the creation of so-called universal accounts. There are a number of cities and municipalities that are looking at the possibility of opening up and providing initial funding for accounts either at birth or at kindergarten. We think that's a very, very hopeful development because that then provides evidence very early on that college is possible and that there is a financial blueprint to get that child to college. So we think that's very helpful. That's something that could potentially be funded out of the College Access and Completion Fund. And the great thing about that fund as proposed is that there is an evaluation component in the proposal, which allows you to go back and take a look at those implementations that have been most effective. And we think that that is something that's very encouraging as well. And then finally, and this was the issue of the federal employer tax credit, we think it's very, very important. The Pension Protection Act provided a lot of provisions for companies to be able to facilitate enrollment and participation in retirement plans in the workplace. And we think there are a lot of provisions that were adopted that could be extremely helpful for families to enroll and participate in the workplace, to actually learn about investments, and to begin to save for college. Not only for their own children, but potentially for themselves as well. They could enroll and participate and save money over time. The accounts are portable, and they could be used for that employee's retraining and reeducation, which we need a lot of in this country, or they could dedicate accounts to their children. So we think that these are all additional things that could really help broaden the funnel, bring many, many more people into participating, saving for college, making college participation and completion a reality, and helping to build not only a savings economy, but a much stronger, better educated, more competitive population. So we thank you very much for being here, for your attendance. And I'll ask you to come up if you will, and I would certainly invite any questions that you have for either Ben or Joan, or I'd certainly be happy to take any questions as well. No questions. Yes?
I was struck by the report you cited regarding the relationship between savings and aspirations. Do you have the name of that report? Do you know where we can
Mark,
find
would you like to say, it's on the New America website. You can go to the College Savings Initiative, and you can actually link on. There is a number of different papers as well as research that has occurred. That was a very recent report, and it's very, very compelling. So I would encourage you to go to our website and pull it up. You can download it and read it, but it's a very, very interesting report. Any other questions? Yes?
I've met families that have been averse to establishing savings banks for colleges because they think it will negatively impact the need analysis. Is there something we can do to communicate whether these plans are sheltered from colleges?
So they're afraid that it might their ability to qualify for financial assistance.
Or decrease the amount of financial assistance.
Decrease the amount of financial aid. In most cases, it's not. I'm going to try to answer this, and I'll let Joan answer it as well. In most cases, it will not affect their qualification for financial aid, but there clearly is a perception, and that is really a blockage for a lot of families. About 16 states have gone in and have explicitly in statute indicated that it can't disqualify you for state grants and scholarships. And at the federal level, about 5.64% of the family's assets are, identified being useful towards that child's education. If you're low and moderate income families, that is rarely going to rise to the level that it's going to have an impact on need-based aid, but there's clearly a perception, and I think that something needs to happen universally so that families are not fearful. The states put a lot of resources into working with people at every single income level, but that is a real point of departure for families who feel like it's going to have a negative impact on financial aid. Did you want to add anything to that?
I agree that it's a barrier, and like I said, we've started a dialogue with the U.S. Department of Education about as they're revising federal financial aid formulas to make this issue clearer. But if you think, it's really less than 6% of what a family saves in a 529 plan would be considered toward the family's expected contribution to college. So if you translate that, for every $1,000 you'd save, less than $60 of that goes through the federal financial aid process as being expected to be used for college in that year. And then when you also think about qualifying for financial aid, when more than 60% of federal financial aid is in the form of loans, very often if you don't save, that means you end up qualifying for more loans later on. So I agree that it's a concern, it's a barrier, because it's a very difficult message to communicate to families of young children, and that's why we've begun a dialogue with the Department of Education to try to change that.
So if I could just follow up, Is this something that the Department of Education can fix by regulation, or is it something that needs a statutory fix?
Not clear, but they had a very positive response to the concern, and I don't think they want to have policies in place that are discouraging savings. So I'm not sure about the technical answer to that, but I do think that they're going to be working on it. And if there is legislative requirement to fix that, I'm sure that CSPN would be more than happy to actively support that too.
Any other questions? Yes.
You discussed how this is had a positive effect. It's sort of come about on a state-by-state level. Could you articulate the key benefits of doing this federally rather than just letting states continue to sort of have 529s pop up?
Well, I think, first of all, the states created these plans. The first plan in the country was the state of Michigan. And the state of Michigan created the plan, followed by the state of Florida and then the state of Ohio. And these plans were really established at the state level back in the late 70s because tuition was growing very rapidly then, as it is now. And states recognized that in order to get more people in college, they needed to help them make early financial preparation for college. So the states really are responsible for these plans in the first place. It was codified in federal statute, in the 529 statute in 2001. But prior to that, the states operated these plans state by state. And Michigan actually waged a battle in court for many, many years because they wanted to be able to pass along tax benefits to their citizens. And the federal government did not want them to do that. Michigan finally prevailed in court. But even before the federal tax benefit, most states that had 529 plans allowed you to use the funds for qualified higher educational expenses without paying taxes on earnings. So there was already a state benefit in place prior to the federal benefit being in place. So CSPN and a lot of the states that operate these plans are largely responsible for the fact that there is a federal benefit. And I think that that's been one of the more interesting parts of this project is that these kinds of innovations have occurred at a state-by-state level. And through Joan's organization, they have the ability to share information, and other states have then adopted these best practices. So there are clearly some responsibilities that accrue to the federal government. There are some that accrue to Treasury because they oversee particularly the section of the code that governs these plans. But these are created by state law and statute, and I certainly would not like to see that happen because I don't think the rate of innovation would exist to the level that it does if they were operated exclusively at the direction of the federal government.
I have two questions, probably for Joan. I'm Susan Reese from Wider Opportunities for Women. Can you tell me what proportion of secondary and elementary age children have accounts now? And do you have any speculation about why wealthier families are not using them to the degree you would expect?
In terms of the percentage of children that have an account, I would guess that it's in probably the single-digit percentage range. If you think that there's 11 to 12 million accounts nationwide, probably about 90% of those are for children younger than 18. So then if you look at the U.S. population of children under 18, my guess is that's going to come out somewhere in the single-digit percent range. So I think
so. Most are 18 now.
Excuse me?
Did you say most of those 11 million are older?
No. I would say 90% of the beneficiaries in those plans are under 18 years old. Okay? So if you take 90% of the 11 to 12 million and then you divide that by the U.S. population under 18, that'll give you the number. I just don't happen to know what the U.S. population under age 18 is. But like I said, I think it's probably somewhere in the single digits. And in terms of, wealthier families, we don't have good income data on these, good data in terms of family income percentage participation in these plans. A number of states ask for it, but it's typically a voluntary thing and not many people provide that information. So we really don't have reliable family income data. And like I said, I think that it ranges across all income spectrums, that there are many families that value education that are doing their best to save. But wealthier people have other places to be able to invest as well. So like I said, I don't think there's any reason why any one group of income level is not participating. I think we're seeing across the board participation, but also across the board just not as much as we need or want to see. Okay.
I saw another question over here somewhere. Yes.
You talk about some of the state tax benefits. You talk about the benefits in terms of the funds that are being withdrawn from the funds. Could you talk a little bit more about tax credits to families that are putting funds into these accounts and a comparison with what's available at the state level versus what's available at the federal level?
That's a great question. About half of the states have some sort of state tax credit or deduction for contributions that are going into 529 plans. Most of them are associated with the 529 plan offered by that state, but some states allow that state income deduction for contribution to any other 529 plan. From there, any earnings would grow tax deferred, typically at both the state and federal level. And then when the funds are used for eligible college expenses, as you said earlier, any earnings will be tax-free, certainly at the federal level and nearly all cases at the state level as well. So again, about half the states have that type of state tax incentive for contributions into a 529 plan. And among a number of the states that don't have that type of tax deduction or tax credit, states like Florida, for example, don't have a state income tax. They don't have the ability to offer that kind of a benefit. But again, we see that across the board. The amounts vary by state, and that's why on our network's website we have that information for each state plan.
But there's no federal tax.
There's no federal tax deduction at this point. That's correct. And we get that question all the time as well from folks who would like to see that. But at this point, there is no federal tax deduction.
Any other questions? Yes.
It seems to me like the difference between low and moderate income families would be a great difference in that probably more low income families don't generally come from educated families and really don't understand the value of getting an education as well as moderate income families. I mean, how would you address the difference between these two and kind of try to explain that to families, the importance of saving?
That is a great question. I'm so glad you asked it, because that gets back to the comment that Jackie made earlier about the involvement of the states in offering these 529 plans, because the states have governing boards, for example, that have close linkages with public schools and also many private schools, obviously. So what we do is the states target all families, with particular emphasis on low and moderate income families, by going to schools, talking with parents, any group, anytime, anywhere, in schools, in churches, in community organizations, and educating families about how easy it is to save in these plans. And so as long as they have aspirations of their child attending college, they should be able to save whatever they can afford to save to try to reduce the debt burden and open up opportunities for their children to go to college. But I would say that's a big advantage of the states operating these 529 plans, is because within the state, they have the contacts and connections within their state to do that form of education and outreach that if it was just left up to a for-profit corporation, for example, might not target those low and moderate income families. But the states have a high priority on targeting those families.
I saw another. Yes.
Comment and question. The increasing reliance on software to prepare taxes, total tax and tax cut, I think both of those programs have a tax analyzer that shows how you can limit how much tax you pay or increase the refunds you have. And I haven't seen anything that talks about 529s. I do see often about IRS. And so one thing that you may want to do is talk to Intuit and HR, some of the two manufacturers of the software, and see if they'll incorporate into their analyzer what the effects would be with the 529 investment.
I would imagine because the benefit varies from state to state, and since they're probably providing a more standardized product, that's why they're not evaluating. But
our program managers have worked with Intuit in terms of the tax form itself, The analyzer is more of a challenge because as people are working on that when they're doing their taxes, that's typically in the first quarter of the calendar year. Now, getting back to most of those state income deductions, we don't have the same law that you do with IRAs that allows you up until April 15th to be able to take advantage of the deduction for the previous tax year. So if you're looking at that in February or March, it's too late for you to get a state tax benefit for that tax year. So that's also an issue. And then on the other end, in terms of realizing the tax-exempt earnings, that's really tied more to when the child goes to college, and you really don't have a lot of discretionary control over when you would take the money out for an eligible expense either.
So again, there's another thing that you might want to look at in terms of being able to take tax credits, tax deductions for the previous fiscal year, like an IRA, up through April 15th.
Yes, and that would be based on individual state tax laws as well, because all these state tax benefits are all in those individual state laws, but that's a great suggestion for states to look at.
The question I had, and I apologize, I came late, so I don't know if you addressed it, but I'm in Virginia. I have a 3-month window to do the prepaid purchase, which I never can seem to remember. I should probably put a sticker on my calendar.
Did you say you had a newborn?
No, he has a window. He has a
Sorry,
window.
because I was saying for newborns, they typically are broader than the window, but you're right.
Did you address what the impact would be if they broaden those windows, or if they eliminate the windows altogether?
Well, I think, there's a prepaid plan in Maryland, and maybe about a dozen states continue to operate prepaid plans, and I think there are different reasons for why they have enrollment periods. But when you're in a prepaid plan, typically it's based on some kind of promise of tuition inflation that you're going to receive in the future. And some states have chosen to have limited enrollment periods in order to be able to get people into the plan. They know exactly how much money is invested in the plan, what the future promise is. Many of them have installment payments that allow you over the course of time to be able to put money aside. And I think that's just how they kind of guide their program. I'm not sure that there are any specific requirements to doing that, but that's kind of a holdover from when these plans were first created. And you find that with savings plans, you can enroll at any time for any reason. It's a little bit different in terms of how they view the administration of the two types of programs.
I have to tell you, on the other side of administering a program, I do kind of like the deadline because we get about 80% of our enrollments in the last 10 days before the end. It's kind of like April 15th for the tax deadline. So I think it really prompts a lot of people to act when they may not have acted otherwise. I also have seen folks like you who have that deadline, and then it is pretty frustrating. And I encourage those people to start in a 529 savings plan. Virginia has 3 great savings plans that you can choose from, and then you can roll it over into the prepaid plan the next year. Another reason why states have the limited enrollment period for prepaid is because the prices change every year as tuition changes as well. So, and then also there's the expense that it takes to market these plans. I know in Maryland and also in Virginia, we're independent state agencies that don't rely on any state funding. So any funds that we use for marketing needs to be paid for by fees that families are paying in the plans. And so we're working very hard to keep those fees as low as we can, which means we can't be out on the airwaves 12 months out of the year. So we really concentrate our marketing expenditures during that limited window as well.
Any other questions? Any questions for Ben? He's the lone man up here.
That's fine.
Okay. Any other issues or any questions? I wanted to thank Lindsay and Mark and Justin for all of their hard work in putting this together today. Thanks very much. We'll be around for a few minutes if anyone has any questions, and thanks very much for your time today.